Hello and welcome to the Disable the Label podcast. I'm your host, Kerry, and on our podcast we'll be chatting about all things disability, holidays, equipment, therapy, funding, you name it, and we'll talk about it. We want to empower and support parents of disabled children across the UK whilst they navigate their child's life. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get into it. This podcast is sponsored by Giraffe and Jenks Limited, a specialist in sourcing and providing postural care equipment and support for everybody. With over 30 years experience of working with children and adults with postural needs, their team is dedicated to bringing you the latest, most innovative, high quality specialist products out there. So check them out on our app, Disable the Label. On today's podcast, we have Nadine, who's come to chat about her experience of having a disabled child and what she's done to help others in similar situation to her. Well, let's get into it. Hello and welcome to the podcast. Today we have Nadine. Nadine, welcome.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. A little hot, but yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, if everyone that's listening, this was recorded when it was extremely hot in the UK and we're waiting for the 40 degrees temperature to arrive. So we're trying to make sure we're cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, or not. It may never come, but you know, it's still really hot. So yeah. Right. I always let all of my interviewers introduce themselves. So you go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the listeners a little bit about you.
Okay, so as you said, my name is Nadine. I'm also a parent carer. I am a carer to my eldest daughter. I have two children, and she is also the source of the inspiration behind my first book. Can I tell you about nystagmus? So I'm also an author. But yeah, mainly I'm a full-time carer, an author, and I've just also launched a new journal for special needs parents.
Cool. So you said you're a parent of a special needs child. Can you tell us a little bit about her diagnosis? Did you say said she was 10? Sorry. Yeah. Tell her about a little bit about diagnosis and kind of, I suppose, your journey a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah, sure. So basically it's so my daughter's 10, and when she was first born, she was a bundle of joy and nothing was awry. We didn't know anything was kind of different or anything to sort of worry about. But we sort of embarked on a journey of lots of hospital appointments, lots of A&E, and what transpired after months of anguish and worry was a diagnosis of a condition called chromosome 18q, which you've probably not heard of. It's incredibly rare. It only affects 1 in 40,000 people. We had never heard about it. And so we were shocked, but at the same time, relieved. So with having a chromosome difference, at the time, the doctor sort of sat us down in the room and explained to us that it might mean that she might have delays, she might have learning problems, and the path that she was going to follow, they weren't too sure because it was so rare. They couldn't really give us a roadmap to what we could be potentially following. So we kind of left a little bit unsure about what her future was going to be, and what it was going to be to have a child who might have a learning disability. So it started my journey as a carer. I didn't realize at that point I was a carer. It was just a parent. I was just a new mum. You know, you're just excited to have a child and equally worried because they've been in and out of hospital. As I mentioned, she was diagnosed with having a chromosome abnormality, but she was also diagnosed with having hydrocephalus at around 6 months, which, if your listeners aren't aware of it, is water on the brain. So when she was diagnosed with that, we were obviously seeing lots of doctors, surgeons to work out whether they were going to do any sort of invasive tests and things like that. But luckily she was fine. But it did set about a trajectory that changed our parenting journey, and it also changed my own individual journey. At the time, I was a working professional in central London, working in media, working full time, expected to have my child and, you know, be
back
on the ground, bounce back, you know, all of that. But actually what happened is I couldn't return back to work because I was going to so many appointments. I would be at the hospital, no exaggeration, about 2-3 times a week, followed by lots of different therapies. I feel really privileged to know all this information, but at the time it was incredibly overwhelming. But she obviously had lots of different therapies and medical sort of checkups to check for everything. So yeah, I didn't go back to my previous life. And that started my new journey as a full-time carer.
So your experience of her diagnosis, what was it like dealing with the diagnosis? Because I'm guessing from what you said, you got the diagnosis and you kind of obviously got more than one diagnosis and lots of medical jargon probably thrown at you all at once. What was your experience of that, and how did it make you feel?
You know, it's really interesting actually in preparing for this podcast and thinking about our journey and thinking about my journal and everything. When we got the diagnosis, I actually really intellectualized everything. Okay. So they gave me the information. I heard all of these words and I pulled out a couple of words that I probably understood, which was learning problems. And I simplified it. I was like, oh, okay, so she might have something like X, Y, and Z. Okay, we can solve that. And so I kind of left feeling, I'm very much like, oh, I'm a doer. I will try to find a way to overcome this problem. So she's less than a year. I'm like, we'll start learning your alphabet. We'll start doing this. We'll start doing extra tummy time, that kind of thing.
Yeah. We'll do this. Like,
we will do this. We will, we'll get where we need to get to. But in terms of how I felt about it, I didn't actually sit down and reflect about how I felt about her diagnosis until some years later, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I think I got really caught up in trying to help her. And it was all about learning as much as I could about the diagnosis, learning as much about what I needed to do for this particular month, this particular milestone, this particular doctor, or trying to help with her eyesight, or trying to help with her hearing, or trying to everything. I was just so consumed with that I didn't actually take any time to look at and reflect on how I was feeling. And as I said, it took some years later, and it took until she probably started nursery when I actually got a little bit more time. And that's when I started to engage with other people slightly more. And then I realized that actually I was probably people would probably say denial, but I wouldn't have classified it as denial. It was probably more me just trying to be proactive, but I was almost denying the diagnosis and trying to make sure that I did as much as possible so that the diagnosis almost wasn't real.
Yeah, so, I get what you mean.
Yeah,
it's kind of like you got the diagnosis and then you were like, I don't know whether fix is the right word, but you were kind of finding things to make sure that she did meet certain milestones or goals or whatever it may be. So in a way that I don't know if you're going at it at a fixing way, but I think when I see parents, they get their diagnosis, lots of different outcomes from that, but some parents need to know more and like you, they want to be proactive and they want to kind of really focus their time and energy on that child. And you're right, it isn't until they either go to nursery or school that then you have that break, and then it's kind of like, oh, actually I now have the ability to feel. In a way, you were stopping yourself from having those feelings because you were focusing so hard on like, that's fine, like it's absolutely fine that she's got this. It wasn't you were in denial of her having it. It was, that's fine, but we're gonna do this and she's gonna still learn, and I'll help her every step of the way, which is absolutely fantastic and still totally needed. But it then puts you as a parent and carer on the back burner in a way, like you said.
Absolutely it did. And it was by no means trying to fix her. I didn't see her as broken per se. It was just a case of you're being given this different information and you're trying to almost learn about this information and adapt. And so it was me trying to consume as much as I can to help her as much as possible. But as you say, when in doing that, in amongst when you have a young child, you're not getting much sleep, you're not getting much rest. No. So you yourself, you don't have any time to really sit there and reflect and be like, how do I actually feel about this? Or
Yeah.
how does my partner feel about this? Or how does my family feel about this? There was no time for that. And yeah, as I said, it took until a few years later to really sit down
Yeah.
and have a look at that, which sounds quite bizarre, but yeah.
No, I don't think it does at all. I think it's, probably a lot of people can relate to those feelings. It comes at different stages for everyone, I think.
Yeah.
Were there specific professionals that kind of really helped you in either the start of your journey or your journey now? Like, has there been people that have, I don't know, has there been people that have potentially hindered your journey, potentially said things that may have then affected your journey or the way that you felt? Or have you met people that have been really supportive and really helpful, but on both sides, I suppose?
I think for me, we have had a lot of professionals in our daughter's life, because as I said, she's affected by so many different ways, physically, as I said, visually, and she has hearing aids, she's got visual impairment. So we've been involved with physios, vision impairment teachers, hearing impairment teachers, all of those things. And I always say that we're really lucky that she got the diagnosis really early,
Yeah.
because we didn't, at the time, I didn't think that, but we're really lucky that she got the diagnosis early, because actually it meant that we avoided a lot of the fight that some parents have to encounter in terms of trying to access certain things. That's not to say we didn't have to fight, because things like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, by the very least, they were incredibly hard to get. And it's a bugbear for myself and probably a lot of parents, where you want that intervention as early as possible.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, I think the most impactful therapies and sort of professionals that we came across with was one of her consultants. She was a no nonsense consultant. I absolutely loved her. She didn't sugarcoat things. She just told us how it is. She didn't try and raise our hopes, but she didn't try to put our daughter down either. And she kept it very real with us. And I think for a parent on this journey, you really need that sort of clear direction. And I really, really like that.
Yeah.
And then the professionals from the therapy side of things, the most impactful for us was probably, which is coming from your background actually, was the conductive education that she actually was on. She accessed it through a small charity called Small Steps, and she went as a young child, and that was really, really good for her, because as I said, she's got so many different needs with physicality as well as centrally as well. So that was really great for her as well. So yeah, it's been very varied, very varied.
Yeah,
We've done a lot of different things, but
it's nice that you had a consultant that was like that, because I actually find it's not many people that say the consultants were their professional that really helped them. It was actually them that kind of, I suppose, in some ways made their journeys worse by the way that they portrayed things across to them. And it's really nice to hear that she was just like, this is what it is, and not giving too much expectation. And I think that they both go hand in hand, don't they? Too much expectation can hurt, but also putting your child down to say what they won't be able to do, which no one can categorically state what they can and will and won't do, is also just as detrimental to a parent. So it's really cool that you had somebody so clear cut, because actually that's what you need as a parent. You just need to know the clear-cut information. So did you learn anything, did you find that you learned anything from conductive education, just as a conductor's point of view? Like, do you feel like you learned, like, obviously a lot from it? Or
yeah, I did. So for me, when my daughter started doing therapies, like, you almost look at your child in parts. So in other words, okay, she's got this challenge, so I need to go and see this person. She's got this challenge, so she needs to go and do physiotherapy or occupational therapy. But with the conductive education, what I really liked was she didn't feel like she was doing therapy, and everything was kind of pulled together and different elements were brought in. So she's also got speech and language difficulties as well. So receptive speech and expressive speech. And so when she was doing the session, she absolutely loves music. So then they would have music playing and she would be doing some singing, but she wouldn't realize that actually they're encouraging her to bend down, as an example, to pick something up. So she's like shifting her weight and things like that. And so that was really, really good for lowering her anxiety around trying to do different things, and also being around other children and it not feeling like such a, because therapy, taking your child to therapy is incredibly stressful. Because sometimes they really cannot do something and they are screaming the entire time you're there, and you're thinking, am I doing what's right for them? They're exhausted when they're finished, they might not then sleep, all of these sorts of things. But then when they go to these other sessions, the pressure kind of eases. And I just like the fact it's so sort of multi-dimensional, because you're touching on so many different things all at the same time. And so for me, that was fantastic. So
yeah. Oh, that's really cool to hear, because actually it's interesting. You go from children that are younger and you play music to them and you sing along and they do stuff, to like, I had to, as I grew in my being a conductor with the children that I was working with, they were 5 when I first started with them, they're now like 50. And that grew from music to let's just have a chat about general things whilst we're doing therapy. And I used to question to myself afterwards, well, am I still being a conductor? And then I used to think, well, actually, they're not going to sing along to kids' music anymore. I would sometimes put, like Ed Sheeran on, they'd sing along to that whilst we were doing work. And I was like, yeah, it's still exactly the same. It's just a different version of a, technique that we learn, as a conductor. But it's really nice to hear somebody who's had such a great experience and their child obviously clearly loved it. But you're right. As a conductor, I always try and explain it like we're kind of like a bubble of people. It's really hard because we are a physiotherapist in some way. We're an occupational therapist in some way. We're a speech and language therapist. We've learned segments of all those things, and we're a teacher and we're a carer, because like I just love all the kids. I can't, the relationship I have with them is completely different to some of their relationships with their physiotherapists, because I look at them as a whole. I am thinking about everything, not just that one thing at one time, which is it's nice that a person that doesn't, hasn't been through that qualification, I suppose, can see that, because that is, you're right, we're just a whole dimensional kind of therapy as such, so it's really nice to hear that that's really helped her and you. So
well, it definitely changed the way I played with her at home as well, because then you could pull in different elements without it feeling like, oh gosh, we've got to do therapy, or we've got to put you in your standing frame, or we've got to those sorts of things. And it's kind of like, when you can ease that away, you can be a parent, because I think sometimes when you're on this journey, when your child has got all of these challenges, sometimes you just forget to enjoy your child, and you forget to actually just parent and be with them. Because for me anyway, I know I was very much like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to do this. And then the day's gone, and actually have I just sat down and just played with her, or just sat there and just watched what she's doing without trying to lead her and coax her and correct her and all of those things. And it was it's been a massive teaching for me, like as a parent, because you think you're going to be one style of parent and you're totally different. You have to change. There's absolutely no way I could have done this years ago. And even being exposed to all of these different therapies has forced me to have to do things in a different way. And so that's been really, really insightful for my own personal journey as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you say, I was able to like step back and just watch her play, because as human beings, we can't help ourselves but help others, and so when you see any child, a baby, just struggling to get something, you just like help them. And actually, a lot of the time as a therapist, I look at the child and I let them try something by themselves first, and if they're really struggling, obviously I'd step in and help in some ways, but seeing how they would do it is really, really key, because then you can help them in other ways, and you can relate that to other things they're doing. Like I always said, as a conductor, we always do bridges, and it's that parents can link that to changing nappies. And especially if your child's then going to be wearing nappies for a longer period of time, they're going to get bigger, they're going to get heavier. You've learnt that in your therapy, use that in your own home, and they're still doing a little bit of therapy every time they put their nappy on, because they're having to lift up their hips. And it's blending it all in. It's not sitting here and there and going, oh, got to do an hour of therapy, because who wants to do that? Because I don't even want to do that. I think it's really interesting when I speak to other parents about conductive education, because I'm a therapist. I didn't work for 7 years because I just had fun, but all the time that I was in therapy sessions. Everyone was like, "Oh, you're so patient," and I'm like, "Well, I'm just having fun. I'm just playing all the time. It's great." Because I just love seeing them having fun, and then you get to have fun at the same time, and it takes it away. You don't realize you're doing therapy, even as a therapist. I just think on the spot, obviously, but it's nice to hear from parents when they've experienced that, because that's what therapy should be like. That's real
It makes
therapy
a
to
big
me.
difference. Yeah, it makes a
Yeah.
big difference.
So at what point did you start becoming an author, and you said your journal. So when did that come into play?
Oh, so my first book I published around 3 years ago, and it was actually born out of, it's actually about her visual impairment, which is nystagmus, which is an involuntary eye movement. So her eyes are always wobbling, and she goes to a special needs school, and it actually came from they were having a discussion about when the time becomes the right time to discuss your child's diagnosis with them. And I was thinking, oh gosh, they know nothing about her diagnosis. How are they going to manage this? And so I thought, oh, okay, they're not going to know about her chromosome difficulty, but they'll probably know about her eye impairment. But they didn't know about that either. So I was like, oh gosh, so I started to get a little bit anxious about this whole process when it comes to the time in her life. And so off I went and thought, well, you know what, I'll write a book, as you do. And so that started the idea, and about a year and a half later it was produced and picked up and subsequently published. And I really wanted to create a story that she would actually be able to resonate with. So the character is based on her. It kind of looks like her. She loves dancing, so she's got like the ballerina, and she loves playing football and all of these things. So it all sort of tied into the story so that it would be relatable to her and to other children, because as you mentioned at the start of the podcast, there's so much medical jargon out there. We don't understand it. How can we get our children to understand these things? You're trying to teach them about an aspect of themselves, and it sounds so alien. So I tried as best as I could to really simplify it, really try and make it a little bit more tactile, not just for her, but for other family members, because some other family members don't really understand what your child might be going through. So it's for grandparents, for other siblings, and so forth. So that it's a talking point. You can sit down, you can talk about the fact that this is what's going on for her. So that was published a couple of years ago, and it's done really well. It's been really embraced by the visual impairment community, and I get a lot of positive feedback from it. So that's been really, really great, and it kind of inspired me to try to help others in another way. And I didn't actually know what I was going to do, but during the pandemic and leading up to the pandemic, should I say. So I was on a personal journey. I was on a course for counselling. I had done coaching and all of these sorts of self-development sort of things. And then the pandemic hit, and it was kind of like everybody was indoors. Everybody couldn't do what they wanted to do. And particularly if you've got a child that's got a condition, you've got another layer of being extremely careful. And so it was kind of like, although you're trying to be careful for them, it adds another layer of anxiety and worry. And actually, you can't go out and speak to anybody. It's hard to offload. You're constantly at home. The pressures are there. And so it's kind of like, how did I release? And so releasing for me is all through writing. And so I started doing the writing, and I thought, oh, you know what, this should be like really good for other parents. But I didn't want it to be just a diary, because you know what, we can get into a cycle of just offloading negative stuff. And I really wanted an opportunity that we can't always kind of keep in this one track. We need to kind of be forward thinking sometimes, because during those days in the pandemic, my daughter surprised me so much. Because we had mummy school at home. So, because obviously there was no school, so we had to do mummy school, and she absolutely shined. I don't know if it's because she had one-on-one time or whatever, but she did so many things that showed me different aspects to her. And it was almost like you want to celebrate, you want to tell people about this thing, and it's like there's nowhere to celebrate or put a milestone anywhere. And I was like, I really want to jot this down. And so I really wanted to capture some of those special moments that other people might not find special. The fact that she can now recite something or add something, or she had an independent conversation with somebody, or any of these things. And so I thought, this is what I wanted to do. So I created the journal as a way to kind of pull all of those moments together, as well as it being a tool for myself to be able to offload in those moments where I'm like, how am I feeling today? Where do I need to be? What's kind of happening with me? And just, so that's how it was kind of designed.
That's amazing. It sounds like something that, whether you're in a COVID situation or not, it's still something fantastic that you can use, because I think a lot of parents, you get kind of stuck in like, okay, next on to the next thing. Okay, yeah, brilliant, that's fantastic. And actually, you're right, some things, and it's something that I kind of really pushed when I first started my my therapy company, is something so small is still needs to be celebrated. So I remember I worked with a little boy and he used his finger for the first time, and I was like, this is fantastic, you know, shouting about it on our Facebook and Instagram. And, you know, people didn't really necessarily see it as that. But if somebody was walking, that was, you know, something to shout about. And so I totally see what you mean. You know, it can be something so small, but actually, like, it can be so amazing. Like, they sing their first song or sing along to their first song. It might not be the exact words. Who cares? Whoever sings the exact words anyway. You know, everyone gets the words wrong. But those things, I think they're so much more meaningful. And like, they're really like, they get you in your heart, actually. And they're so personal. So it's really fantastic that you can go back and look at that and remember those things, because those are actually the things that you're probably more likely to forget than the things of, she stood for the first time, because you're going to remember that. Let's be honest, you know, you're not necessarily going to remember those little small things of, you know, she recited this for the first time, or we had our first full-on conversation for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it was. And I think that's really cool, because we forget those things, and sometimes all the negative and hard times can overwhelm us, and, you know,
absolutely,
be at the forefront of our minds, or even our memories. You know, it's hard to look back on our lives and go, oh, these great things happened, because I'm sure you can pick out all the bad things that happen, because that's what our brains automatically go to.
That's exactly what it is. And I think that's the thing that people don't actually realize. When you are under chronic stress, which actually a lot of carers are, your brain is actually always in fight or flight. And so when you're in fight or flight, you do go to those memories so much easier. Your brain actually starts to become wired that way. So it does become harder and harder to see some of the good things that are happening, or remember those so as easily. And so it's great, as you say, to pick it up and read it and think, oh God, yeah, she did do that. And then that for me can just really ground me sometimes, because sometimes you don't always see progress in the way that you want. Sometimes you feel like progress might go backwards sometimes. And so sometimes when you see those things, you're like, you know what, you have to look at your journey and realize that it's like this. It's not just that all the time. So it's been really great for us and our family.
Yeah, especially, I mean, you obviously haven't got to the stage yet, but the stage where you're kind of on the cusp of it, I would say from anywhere between 8 and 10 to like 15, 16, 17, they go through so many growth spurts, hormonal changes, etc., that I had to explain to a lot of the parents. It's not that I'm not trying to improve them, but every time we do something and they grow, we've gone backwards. Not they can still do it, but they have to potentially relearn that, because their limbs are longer and things are different and feel different to them. And it's like, you know, you see them, I'm like, did you grow this week? Because you can't seem to do this week, and I know you can definitely do it. And I used to remind the parents, it may feel like they're not achieving, but they're still having to re-achieve that goal. Like, you know, we as people without any physical disability, learning disability, anything, we don't have that situation. We just keep going forwards, and it's not that they're not going forwards, they are, but it's in a different way. So actually, you know, it can feel in those years, definitely it can feel like they're not improving, or there's no improvements made. But if you then go back to this kind of thing and look, actually, you know, you will see those small things even more. So I think it's really cool that's part of it. So what else? So you've got what is in the journal itself? Like,
okay, So as I said, the journal has those aspects of it, but I basically wanted to help people go on a journey. So it has got some bits about my life. It's got a little bit personal sort of anecdotes to help people understand why I understand their journey. So it takes them from the beginning and gives them an opportunity to kind of speak about how they became a parent. And then it takes them to a place where they are now, presently, and then where they maybe want to be in the future. And then they can also talk to their child within the journal as well. But one of the elements that I really love about within it as well is it gives you a chance to think about the other parent that you've had your child with. Whatever your sort of situation might be, whether you're with your partner or not with your partner anymore, but you've potentially shared having this child with somebody, and that person also went on a journey, but it might not have been the same as you. And it's given you the chance to sort of reflect. How did it go with them? Did you go through it together? Did you not go through it together? And all of those sorts of things. It gives you an opportunity to kind of reflect where you both could be in terms of adjusting to becoming a parent with a child with a learning disability, because we all go through different stages. Within the journal, I reference it as the ladder of adjustment. Like when you first get the diagnosis, you might go through that sort of anger and sadness, and then you work your way through the ladder up until you're accepting and you're feeling a bit more optimistic about the situation. But where you are on the ladder might not be the same as your partner, or might not be the same as the grandparents or the siblings. And actually kind of having that visual to kind of understand where you could be or where other people could be, I felt was really, really important. And it kind of gives you a little bit of empathy, because actually just because you're feeling one way, if your husband or partner or girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever is feeling differently, it might be a talking point for you. Because it's really shocking to think that over 50% of parent carers end up divorced, and they do attribute a lot of it to their care and responsibilities. And so there is an immense amount of pressure on relationships as a whole anyway, regardless of if you're a parent carer. But then add in the aspect of the fact that you've got these extra things to take into account, whether it's financial obligations as well as your child as well. You've got a lot more stresses going on, and actually giving yourself a little bit of time. It's not like a massive amount of the journal, but it's just a little bit to give you just a little bit of space to kind of reflect on that, and maybe provide a talking point for those special people in your life as well.
That's really, really cool. Honestly, it sounds amazing. I think I know so many people that could use it and just really benefit from it, because everybody's journey is different. So, and I remember a parent saying to me, like, there's no like guidebook, and there isn't, but this is it's a way to help you guide yourself through it in a way. Like you can see where you've come from, you can try and feel or think where you would like to be. That those things are going to help you in so many different ways, and there's no right or wrong way. So which is like, the journal really helps with that. So where can people buy it?
Okay, so you can buy it from Amazon, and you can also buy it from my website, which is specialjourneyjournal.com. So yeah, if you just follow that link, you take you to the collection of them, because there's a couple of different designs that you can choose from. But yeah, you can grab your
cool. So have you had any feedback from people that have used it?
Yeah, I've had a little bit of feedback from people, and generally people have just said that it's something that, depending on who's got it at what stage that they're at, they're kind of like, I wish I would have had this at the beginning of my journey as a parent, because it's one of those things that you don't realize that you probably need, but whenever you do get it, it doesn't actually matter where you are on your journey, because your journey, as you said, is always continuing. So yeah, I think that's generally the feedback that I've had from people.
Yeah, I would agree. It's something that a lot of parents would go, oh, why didn't I have this? Like, oh, if only I'd had this sooner, or like, maybe my journey would be different. And I think it's great to be able to say that, but actually everyone's journey would be different if we changed so many different things. So actually using it now is really, really key. So thank you so much for sharing about it. It's fantastic.
No worries at all.
It's something that I think I'll definitely, obviously be sharing about you guys, your book and everything, because I think parents
are always struggling with various different things, and if you have people that are there supporting in whatever way it may be, you know how people might be feeling or have felt or etc, or people might know how you felt or could be feeling in the future. So I think it's really nice when a parent has produced something that's like this, because it's come from a place where like like you are there. It's not like absolutely. Somebody like me going, oh, I think you need this. Like I even remember when I started DTL, I went, I feel like they need this, and then I said to like 5 or 6 different parents, like, tell me if I'm wrong, but would you benefit from this? And they were all like, yeah. Oh, okay, right. Well, do you want to help me do this then? Because you're a parent and you know what you want. I don't know what you want because I'm not a parent. So it's great, and I know that some parents aren't in the place that they could do what I'm doing, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's really great that you felt that you were able to do that, because it are clearly going to help loads of people. So yeah, thank you.
I really hope. No problem whatsoever. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I do hope that a lot of people can take some sort of support from it. I mean, we're in a time where everybody's talking about mental health and trying to be kind to yourself, and access to these things are not necessarily always at the fore, and so it just gives you a little space, hopefully at a not too expensive price point for you to be able to look after yourself a little bit better. So
yeah, totally. So how can people follow your journey and everything?
Well, if you check out the website, as I said, on specialjourneyjournal.com, and I'm also on Instagram as well. I'm not so active on that at this moment in time, but
it's hard to do everything.
It's hard to do everything, definitely. Like, along with caring and trying to do this, it's definitely a challenge. But if anybody wants to reach out to me, they can send me a direct message, and I will definitely get back to them and stuff. But yeah, I'm on there at the moment.
Cool, perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kerry. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to the Disable the Label podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment to let us know what you thought of this episode. More episodes will be coming soon, so make sure you tune in. Don't forget you can download our app for free via the App Store. That's Google Play or Apple App Store. Just search Disable the Label and you'll find us.